If you're interested in the evolution of the frame in 1900 through the 1980s, check out the link to the video in the description. And we're going to continue with our breakdown of how the frame in ballroom dance has evolved over the decades. Because just like we see in ice skating, where kind of each decade, the figures are fancier, it looks different. We used to see Sonia Henning and wow, she did one spin, yay. And now we're looking at quadruple Lutzes. Dance sport is no different. Okay, so in the 1990s, I'll call this the Hilton era. So this is legendary Marcus and Karen Hilton. And they're renowned for not only winning the ballroom at Blackpool, but previously winning the Latin before that. So very well-rounded dancers, very highly respected. And I'm going to show you a photo of them now, and then we'll talk about kind of what they're doing with their top line that has changed from the decades leading up to there. So here is Marcus and Karen. These are world champions from the 1990s. Here you go. So as you can see, the connection is becoming more and more and more frontal instead of out to the side compared to the previous decades. As you can see in Marcus's head position, it's no longer forward. It's up behind the sternum, and the sternum is forward, and the head is almost back on his pelvis. And this day and age, it's going to get even more extreme, but I'll show you that in a few minutes. Okay, so that was dancing from the 90s. Now we're going to roll into the 2000s, okay? And so we're going to take a peek at Christopher Hawkins and Hazel Newberry, beautiful dancers. And you're going to see more complete shape, lowering in the legs, which leads to better flight, which leads to better swing, which leads to more complete sway, more of the ballooning out, flowering out action instead of, certainly at the beginning of the century, it was literally in, like an Argentine tango. So the trend is more here instead of to the side. Elbows are getting higher and higher and higher for both man and lady in this decade. And really firmly by the time we're in the 2000s, you never see the lady's back line dropping. At that point, his top line is high enough that she has more of the draping action instead of a hanging action like we saw in pictures from the previous decades. And so here's Christopher and Hazel. Be right back. So compared to previous decades, the lead's left hand getting farther and farther and farther out, making a wider top line. Elbows getting higher and higher and higher up. Knee connection becoming more and more and more forward. This allows us a lower connection with the partner. So the frame, 80 years ago was based all up in here. That was our frame. And it's just transitioning each decade lower and lower and lower and lower to at this point, in the 2000s, we're following from the knees and the feet. And so hopefully you saw that with Christopher and Hazel's photo. It is definitely more tilted from the waist, though, than it is today. So if this were the partnership, the lead is upright. I'm exaggerating. She's still very out from the waist. More than him. Instead of this day and age, it's knees, and we're both have a circular rotation out instead of a more angular top line. Okay, guys, now we're going to shift, fast forward to the 2000s. And this is when the longest reigning world ballroom champions were in their heyday. So we're talking about Arunas and Katusha, of course. So I want to show you a picture of them first, and then we'll talk about what the heck they're doing that has changed from all those previous decades. So here's the beautiful Katusha and Arunas. So as we saw in their photo, the connection is full on sternum. Sorry guys, trying to fit in this photo. Sternum all the way to the knee. Okay, so this is definitely a more complete body connection than we've ever had. And that creates, because we're so close up here, more of this shape instead of this shape. So here instead of here. This is much easier to navigate the floor. This creates great centrifugal and centripetal force. So you can do very powerful pivoting actions, very complete three-dimensional picture figures. You'll also see, and I might even show you a little snapshot of that photo again so you can check out huge development in the lead's head positions. It is definitely not only not forward anymore, not upright, not slightly back. You're gonna see his head position is actually, although his sternum is still ahead of his feet, his head, particularly when they are shaping, is even behind his pelvis. And this creates a very round frame as opposed to a flat frame. Okay, I'm going to show you that photo one more time. So check out Arunas's head and how that affects the frame. And you could probably also see with each passing decade, because the lead's left hand goes farther out, the lady's back line gets much larger because my right hand is constantly going farther out. Whereas in the olden days, from photos I've shown you from previous decades and previous videos, that arm was so in that as lady, if you were to look at my top line from behind as follow, it would actually be saggy because it's so in. I can no longer sag when it's out here like an orangutan. It's long and it's wide and it's pretty. Okay, guys, let's move on to our current world champions, Valerio and Anya. And so you can see an even further completion of those characteristics I just talked about, where the lead's sternum is very far ahead. The lead's head, it's behind, not broken chicken neck behind, but toned behind, more like a bow and arrow. And as a female, I certainly have a much smaller, less muscular back, more flexible, so I can do that even more to counterbalance. Kind of like if you were in a teeter-totter and you have a big giant kid and a little bitty kid. That little bitty kid, this is the follow, woo, goes all over the place. And the big kid goes a little bit. But it used to be just big kid, and then the follow had to kind of do their own thing over there. So the connection is much more graceful. We're actually shaping together instead of I'm just shaping off him. I'm just shaping off him. So let's take a peek at the beautiful Anya and Valerio. Here you go, guys. I'll be right back. Okay, now I'm going to give you another view of Valerio and Anya in promenade position. And I apologize for going back and forth between the names Anya and Anna. I have known her since she was, 10 or 11 years old. And she used to come to New York and stay with her sister. I was there with her very first Blackpool. She was too young to compete. This was not junior Blackpool. She tagged along with Jonathan and Katusha to Blackpool. And I would take her down. She was just a kid. She loved, we had an arcade there in the Winter Gardens, and she loved this, like, I suppose it's an old school version of Mario Kart where you would get in this like pretend car and drive this video game. Anyway, at that time, and I've known her a long time, she used to go by Anya. Now she goes by Anna. So I apologize for flipping back and forth. I mean, I know her as both. So depends what decade I'm thinking of when I think of her. But anyway, here is the beautiful Valeria and Anya. And we're going to see them in a promenade position. So you can see that very low knee connection, a very three-dimensional top instead of the two-dimensional top we saw progressively kind of even worse through those previous decades. Here you go. Okay, and I have a super fun photo for you. I'm going to do a side-by-side of the 1980s professional champions, Michael and Vicky Barr, next to Anna and Valerio, so you can see that comparison of the full body connection, where the lead's head position is, the extension of the arms, the more flowering out shape, rotational rotary swing instead of just very two-dimensional. So I'm going to show you a side-by-side. We're going to take a peek at the 1980s versus today dancing. Here you go. Okay, so I think it was pretty evident. The connection now initiates way low in the knees. So over the decades, it's gone from, well, no connection at all, just the top, down, 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 just the waist, down, 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 down. And now we have a complete connection, and that obviously completely alters where the top line is. And the frame over time has gone from a compact frame to an expansion frame. Obviously, tango's a little bit different, but the tango as well is much wider than it used to be. So anyway, guys, I hope you found that to be interesting. I know it's hard to put 100 years in a nutshell. If you missed the 2 other videos where I talk about the previous decades, I do include pictures, super fun. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning with some more fun ballroom dance topics. Thanks for joining me today. Have an awesome night. Bye, guys.